The category is What the Trans, darling?
Hello, and welcome to What the Trans.
Ooh, What the Trans. Hello and welcome and all that stuff Michelle just said.
Yes, I just said it. So how are you doing, Ashley? Are you okay?
I'm all right. As you can probably hear, I've got a bit of a cold rather than a cocaine problem. Time of year for it, unfortunately.
Can you not have both? Can you not have a cold and have a cocaine problem?
I mean, I'm sure it's possible, but I imagine having a cocaine problem while you've got a cold would be a bit of a faff, because if you've got a blocked nose, how are you gonna snort the stuff? It's probably gonna present some problems, I guess. You just have to rub it on your teeth or bake it into cookies. I don't know what you do with cocaine.
Bake it into cookies?
I haven't. Don't ask me, man. I don't do cocaine.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing. If you're going to be taking cocaine, you actually have to take it. I think you failed at the first hurdle there.
I very much have, yeah, indeed. And despite being, a rock star, which I'm totally not, but despite being in a band for ages, I don't have a cocaine habit. But there's still time, I suppose.
Yeah, life is an unpredictable mess of nonsense and things. Speaking of unpredictable nonsense and mess, you were on TV, right?
That was a really nice segue, Michelle. And yes, I was. It's probably best to point out straight away that I haven't seen The Thing yet. So I was on a television documentary on Channel 4 called Cancelled.
Which nobody else can watch either, because it's not on all four.
It's not on all four, it's not on 4OD, all of the stuff that I would have expected to be able to catch up on afterwards. Because I don't actually have the technology to watch television on broadcast. We don't have a cable box or a aerial or whatever it is you use to watch television nowadays. It was something digital, I assume. We don't have that technology. So I've not seen it yet. So this whole documentary with Richard Bacon, which I haven't seen. Now, I have spoken to some people, including Michelle, who have differing opinions of the piece itself as a whole, and I've not seen it. So if you have an opinion on that, that's fine, but I don't know. I don't know how to put this into a larger context. Was it okay? Was I misled? I don't actually know, so I'm not going to really be able to have that conversation. But they paid for me to go down to London, and I stayed in a nice sort of funky little hotel, and then I met a friend after I did the filming, and we went to a delicious, lovely restaurant and caught up for the first time in years. So I had a lovely time. Perhaps that's not the best way to look at it, particularly if I end up having stringent objections to the program itself. But yes, so that was a thing that happened, and probably more on that next time after I've actually been able to view the thing.
Yeah, I have thoughts.
Yes, I know you have thoughts, darling.
I have thoughts, and I'm just going to leave it there. I think people are going to know what my thoughts are based on what I just said.
Yeah, well, given the tone of your voice. But, what's slightly more interesting for me, really, is that you won an award.
Yeah, that happened.
Yes. So go on, what was that? Tell us the tale, spin us the yarn.
Well, it started with getting a message from someone from Trans in the City, a group who try to make a space in the corporate world in London specifically, saying, do you want to come to this gala event we're hosting? And I was like, I mean, sure, I like champagne canapes, and it's going to be great because there's going to be loads of trans people there, and there's probably going to be some trans people that I haven't seen in 2 years. People who I would usually bump into at prides and events and stuff and try and get 2 minutes on a dictaphone, they're probably going to be there.
Yeah.
Then got an email saying, you've been nominated for the Community Champion Award. And I was like, well, that's a normal thing to happen. That happens every day. But then I was thinking, why me and not Ashley? This is a two-person thing. Why is it just me? This is weird. I don't know what to do about that. So I was in two minds whether I should even go to the thing or not. But then I learned that a child had been nominated. And I say child, I mean she's like 13. Emily, who's from Liverpool, who's done amazing stuff. She started like LGBT clubs. She's spoken out in the media about, trans issues and being a trans kid. And I'm just like, oh, okay, she's one.
Yeah.
She's one. Like, that's fine.
Yeah, why would you nominate, a young teenager, a young person, with no intention of giving them the award, right? That would be weird.
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
I was talking to some friends of mine. We're big fans of Larry David, the guy who made Seinfeld and who makes Curb Your Enthusiasm. And one of my friends was just like, if you win, this is going to be your Curb Your Enthusiasm episode. where you win, you'll hold the thing, and the child will be there, and everyone will hate you because you stole it from a child. And that's going to be like your episode of Curb With Enthusiasm. So I had friends like sending me the theme tune, so I just opened my phone, it would just go. But then Stone the Crows, they read out my name, and I sat there. It felt like an hour, but I was sat there. I've seen like videos and stuff since, and I was there for a good like 10 seconds, just sat there like, well, this wasn't supposed to happen. And so I went up, I collected the thing. I gave a massive shout out to you saying it's just as much yours as it is mine, which is true. And then I told all the people in the room, because this was a corporate thing with cis people who like run banks and stuff. Like the CEO of Deutsche Bank was there, and they're like a bank that have money. I don't know what banks do. I know it's not very good sometimes, but anyway. And I told them all to call ministers and MPs and stuff and tell them to get the foot off trans people's necks or something. I can't remember exactly what I said.
There is a video.
There's a video out there. I'll put a link to it. But yeah, that was something. We're now an award-winning podcast, Ashley.
I know, right? So thank you, listener, for tuning in to the award-winning What the Trans podcast. But again, it does seem a bit strange. So who was sponsoring this particular award? Was it Virgin Media?
Virgin Media O2, which
right.
I was astonished to find out aren't two different companies.
Yeah, they are.
I thought O2 was owned by BT or something.
No. Well, I mean, maybe it was, but, the corporate world involves a lot of, changing of hands of things.
Yeah, I can see that. But yeah, I mean, there was a guy there who was from Virgin Media, and he was sort of like talking the preamble, and then he just said, and now to give the award, it's really important to make media spaces and media stuff. And I was just like, I don't think Emily... Has Emily got like a podcast or a YouTube channel or something? That's what I was thinking. And then it was just like he read the name. I was just like, oh, he's talking about me. He's talking about us.
Something I didn't know about? Yeah.
I'm never going to get over it. It's so strange. I mean, thank you so much, Trans to the City. It was the honour of my life. And Emily was really cool. We talked after. She's going to come on the pod at some point. She was very, very smiley and happy about the whole thing. I have a feeling she's going to get a lot of them. I mean, she's 25 million years younger than me. I say that to make me sound old, not to make her sound like, an embryo. She's a teenager.
And we're not teenagers. We're a long way being past.
And we're not. So she's going to have...
Yeah,
she's going to get like a whole shelf full of these at some point, I'm sure. I'm looking up at it right now. It's silly. It's right there next to my model of Jon Snow from Game of Thrones. And Gonzo from the Muppets. They're sort of flanking it.
I think if my name had been on it as well, I had one of these things, I'd be like, oh, I don't want to put it on display. I'll just keep it in the cupboard or something because it's just weird.
I'm displaying a fuck out of it. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Of course I'm going to display it.
I know, but
this is never going to happen again, Ashley.
We are not going to get a corporate sponsored award ceremony giving us an award because, I mean, I'm just surprised. Have they listened to the podcast? Do they know what we think generally about corporations?
Well, a very wise friend of mine explained it this way. Trans people have different opinions on a lot of things, but there's always trans people trying to make space for other trans people somewhere. And this is what Trans in the City is trying to do. They're trying to make a space for trans people who work in that corporate world. And those people exist.
For sure.
In fact, it's very rare that I talk to a trans person who works in that world and they're unhappy. I mean, sometimes I talk to someone and they're just like, the corporation I work for is evil. Like, seriously, I'm having trouble sleep at night. But most of the time, it's like, they treat me really well. Because it turns out those big corporate places, if you have certain skills, they really want to keep you because you make them lots of money. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, it's all about the bottom line, isn't it?
Yeah, so if you are worth something to them and you can take some cash and make it worth so much more to them, trans or not, they'll probably want to keep you by the sounds of it. This is not an advertisement to go work for these places because that is entirely up to you. But, that's the thing that I've been told repeatedly. So that's what Trans in the City are trying to do. They're trying to create a space for all these trans people that are working in the city, which is in London. It's basically where all of these... They call it the City of London.
City, yeah.
It's a part of London, which is basically full of places that have billions of pounds and most of them you've never heard of. So it was very strange to be there, me, being, this and walking around this really swanky law office, just like, this is like the officers from The Good Fight, only posher. Yeah, it was a very, very cool evening, though.
Yeah.
Had a real laugh of a lot of people.
Legit, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And, you do stuff. As well as the podcast, you kind of get out there and organise and talk to people and shine a light on people, on the podcast and through the podcast Twitter and stuff. So, it does kind of make sense that would be the category of award that you get. So, congratulations.
Well, thank you. Now that I'm an award winner, it's all changed now, Ashley.
Yeah.
You've got to bring me drinks.
It's a solo project now, is it? Or
Ashley, go get me a coffee.
I could, but by the time I bring it to you, it will be cold because I'm not in the same city as you. So
I like that is your one objection to it. Not that I'm being a bellend just demanding you bring me drinks, but the geography is the issue you have.
I mean, I'm going to use the geography, and then if you demand further, I'll be like, well, I'm not going to pay for a train or a bus. And then if you demand that I do it, then I'll be like, okay, now you're being a dick. So, there's several lines of defense before I have to start casting aspersions. Anyway, it has been an interesting couple of weeks for us.
Yeah,
but let's
say the least.
So let's crack on with the stuff that we usually do on the podcast. And there's a thing that we to start with on the podcast that's not just us wittering, which is what is it? Oh, not the news.
Oh God, it never stops. It never stops.
It never stops. Sadly, we've got a couple of quick news items for you this week, and so to start, we're going to talk about conversion therapy. Last month, the UK government have outlined their plans for a so-called conversion therapy ban, which includes new legislation and policy that supposedly intends to ban the practice. And so for the 3 or 4 of you who might not know, conversion therapy is defined as an umbrella term for a therapeutic approach, any model or individual viewpoint that demonstrates an assumption that any sexual orientation or gender identity is inherently preferable to any other, and which attempts to bring about a change of sexual orientation or gender identity, or seeks to suppress an individual's expression of sexual orientation or gender identity on that basis. So that wordy definition comes from the Memorandum of Understanding on Conversion Therapy, which is a document put together by 30-odd organisations who work in healthcare and trans health, including NHS England and NHS Scotland and many, many others. So the government did release their plans as part of an open public consultation, which anybody can respond to with their thoughts on the proposals, and we encourage everyone listening to take 20 minutes to do just that. But first, what is being proposed? So to boil it down, the government are proposing a so-called ban that does include gender identity as well as sexual orientation. So that's a pleasant surprise, seeing as this government have been very, very cozy with certain anti-trans organisations that have been very, very against including gender identity in the ban because they want to carry on torturing trans people, I guess. As part of the proposals, the government intend to strengthen the legal consequences for individuals or groups if they are caught practicing, quote, physical acts of conversion therapy, end quote, operating similarly to how someone convicted of a hate crime would receive a longer prison sentence than somebody who assaulted somebody else and it wasn't a hate crime, for example. Now, they are also proposing a ban on talking conversion therapies by introducing a new criminal offence which makes it illegal to practice this form of conversion therapy on under 18s in any circumstances and on over 18s only if they have not consented to it. Now, call us sticklers here, but if this so-called conversion therapy ban allows the practice to happen to over 18s who have consented to it, then that's not banning conversion therapy. So it could be argued that by allowing this loophole, you're allowing and possibly protecting the practice. It's easy to see how someone consenting to something could be misled, and the conversion therapy that they are presented with is not what they consented to, because that's not what the organisation provides. They're there to try and convert people away from being gay or from being trans. In the proposals, the government had this to say as to why they were seemingly allowing the practice to continue, and I'm going to do this in my government voice. The government is aware of concerns regarding the impact of legislation. We recognise there is a plurality of experience in this area and that there are adults who seek counselling to help them live a life that they feel is more in line with their personal beliefs. We will come back to that. We do not intend to ban adults from seeking such counselling freely, but consent requirements will be robust and stringent. The person entering the arrangement must have freely consented and received all the appropriate information about the potential impacts, short and longer term, of such counselling to allow them to do so. Otherwise, this would amount to an offence. While there are adults who may choose to undergo conversion therapy, it is the government's view that those under 18 years of age are more vulnerable and therefore are at higher risk of being harmed. As such, our approach provides stronger protections for those aged under 18 years. So in response to these proposals, Stonewall's chief exec Nancy Kelly, who we've had on the podcast, voiced her disappointment with the proposal as it stands, stating that, quote, "We welcome the commitment to introduce legislation to ban so-called conversion therapy. However, the news of a consultation is concerning and will be hard for our communities to hear. We don't need a consultation to know that all practices that seek to convert, suppress, cure, or change us are dangerous, abusive, and must be banned. Lesbian, gay, bi, trans, intersex, and ace communities have been waiting almost 3 years for the government to follow through on their promise to ban all of conversion practices, and any delay leaves us at further risk of abuse. The UK government must publish a comprehensive bill now, as well as a clear timeline for its implementation. As part of the Banned Conversion Therapy Coalition, we will continue to hold the UK government to account on their promise to ban this abhorrent practice for good, everywhere it happens and to everyone it harms, and to protect our communities from harm." End quote. Now, we've included Stonewall's guidance on how to fill in the consultation, as well as a link to the consultation itself on our website. Head to the link in the description to access that. But yes, what do you think, Michelle? Are you happy with how this has been phrased?
No, because it's not a ban. Like, yeah, okay, there is a ban in place of sorts to protect young people, which on the surface sounds like a good thing, but if you read the document that they released as part of this consultation, they keep saying that the ban works both ways. In that if anybody tries to change the gender identity of a trans person or a cis person, or vice versa, any direction, that is going to be unlawful, which I think has been included to placate certain groups who are very, very into the idea of gender identity being taken out of the ban entirely.
Yes.
And this has been a thing. Wouldn't usually get a litmus test of what all of the anti-trans organisations are thinking on this, but this time I did have a look, and the thing that gave me some comfort is that all of the anti-trans nightmare groups that you would be aware of, the Transgender Trend, LGBT Alliance, Evangelical Alliance to a certain point, are not happy with the ban because it includes gender identity. And them and certain journalists and outlets have been saying we should slow down the ban to have more discussion on whether gender identity should be included at all. So I think that's a good sign. If the anti-trans people are against it,
then it's probably...
Yeah, it probably means that there's some stuff in there that they don't like, which includes protecting trans people from conversion therapy. But this... the government could say as much as they like, we're going to put in all of this stuff that's going to make sure that consent is robust and everyone is informed before they consent to torture.
Quite.
But how is that going to actually work in practice? Let's say somebody who's been brought up all their life in a certain religion or a certain ideology, or a certain twisted definition of a religion, I should say. They are told that who they are is bad from day one, and they want to stop that from being a thing. Is that consent? I don't know if it is.
So I think, on the face of it, that scenario you have just described, no, it isn't. Now, there's the whole, I guess in a sense, this kind of touches on the Gillick competence issue that we've discussed in previous episodes about the ability of a young person to consent to some level of meaningful treatment. Now, because a lot of the time, perhaps in these places that have as you say, a twisted version of a religion or ideology or whatever, the parents will be only too happy to consent for their child to undergo something that is genuinely harmful because it aligns with their religious/political beliefs, and they don't want their kid turning out like one of those transgenderists kind of thing. I think what concerns me about it, as well as the consultation, which we'll come on to in a moment, is the fact that if they're including a ban on conversion therapy, okay, so it could be within the scope of it to say, well, you are trying to make cis kids be trans, and that means you are, going to be charged under this new legislation, which if you stretch the definition, which this government does love to do, you could then say, well, there's these gender identity services, and they just convert cis people into being trans and blah, blah, blah. So you kind of think, I guess that's my concern really, is that, if the definition is loose enough, someone from the anti-trans nightmare crowd will take a case to the court, which will then, fall under this legislation, and then we'll have a problem, even more of a problem, with trans healthcare because one of the clinics has been censured or, has been found legally doing conversion therapy when actually they've been doing nothing of the sort.
Yeah.
So that's kind of something that bothers me. They're trying to want to lump trans healthcare in with a conversion therapy ban. Now, I don't think that seems to be the primary purpose of this. The primary purpose of this is probably just to get people to stop whinging at them about it, given that they have promised this thing 3 years ago and it's, only just appearing now after months of fairly sustained pressure from groups like Stonewall. But once again, and we in the trans community and the UK government and their love of consultations is just astonishing. And again, it's that phrase, right? The rights of the minority should not be subjected to the whims of the majority. And so that's where we're at. Once again, a public consultation saying, should we do this? Should we ban conversion therapy? So all of the people that are pro-conversion therapy, they're going to be filling that in. A lot of uninformed people reading their takes from the Times and the Daily Express are going to be filling that in. So, we need to fill it in and say this stuff is abhorrent. We need to get rid of this practice. So, dear listener, darling, please, fill it in. Get your friends to fill it in. Get your parents to fill it in. Because if they're going to try and make this a numbers game, we need to respond, annoyingly.
Yeah, the current proposals, they keep going back to that thing of... I think this was written with the idea that cis-het people need to be protected. I think that's a big part of it, where it comes to, what is essentially going to work in practice as a religious exemption to this. The Conservatives don't want to annoy their right-wing Christian base, who are broadly, not all, but broadly, against the idea of conversion therapy being banned because they don't believe that LGBT stuff is
valid,
a thing, or they believe it's a sin or whatever. But yeah, I get the impression this is more about protecting people who aren't LGBT. They keep going on and on in the consultation about how this is going to be equal and protect everyone, cis and het, and... is there therapy out there that's designed to turn people trans? Because if there is, I haven't had it.
Yeah, right.
All of the therapy
didn't need it.
All the therapy I had was basically trying to convince a cis person, no, I am. They weren't being like, oh, have you thought about transitioning? I was like, oh, I think I need to. And they were like,
do you though?
What do you think about when you masturbate?
Just gatekeep until desistance has been the order of the day for a long time, and it's...
Yeah. It's very, very strange. But yeah, fill in the consultation because, like Ashley said, every goddamn anti-trans nightmare is going to. And then when they publish the results in the months or years to come, looking at how long it took the last time
yes, quite.
they did a consultation on LGBT stuff, we'll be able to know more. But for now, I think it's important to fill this thing in and then brace for impact.
And then we'll deal with the rest of it. As it comes up. Anyway, so yeah, fill in the consultation. I'll be doing it. Michelle's doing it. I'll get everybody I know to do it.
Hey, it's Michelle from the... I don't even know what. I guess the past. But it's always going to be the past when you hear this, so I don't exactly know. I'm cutting in as I edit this, because the government have extended the consultation by another 2 months. So you've got 2 whole months now to fill in this consultation, which happened seemingly according to the press as a result of Fair Play for Women, the transphobic hate group run by Dr. Nicola Williams, who's the worst, complaining about not having enough time to submit answers. And also there being a lack of easy read documentation around the consultation. It's kind of one of those deals where they were kind of right about the lack of accessibility and stuff. But I have a feeling that they were more into it because they wanted more time to get more transphobes going in. So it's probably doubly important now that you respond to the consultation. So as you hear this, you've got basically 2 months to go to the link in the description and fill in the consultation response and say why the current plans are nonsense, because they're not banning conversion therapy in the conversion therapy ban. And you know that every transphobe is going to be on this, trying to get them to not include gender identity. So it's very important that everyone listening puts in a consultation response saying, hey, don't drop gender identity from this stuff, because it's pretty important. And if they release the results and try to do it anyway, I think that's going to be very important to point out. But anyway, back to the past. The other past. Not this past, the other past.
So our next story, what do we have?
Well, it starts with some old news, but then the stuff that is the actual meat of the story is far more recent. So the last bit of news. Last month, the BBC News website published an article with the headline, "We're being pressured into sex by some trans women." Oh, God. That headline and that article caused understandable uproar in the community, as it was supposedly about how trans women are going around coercing cis women into sex. The article was highlighted by trans people as portraying trans people, in this case transgender women, as dangerous and harmful, and would likely inspire abuse and violence against transgender people, and to be honest, it's pretty hard to argue with them. The story itself was based on an online poll by rabidly anti-trans nightmare group Get the L Out, who were last mentioned on this podcast a billion years ago when they hijacked Pride in London 2018. And they are on the more extreme end of the radical anti-trans ecosystem. They include members like Dr. Julia Long and Anne Ruslio, who are, to put it bluntly, probably more extreme than Posey Parker in their views. Like, they absolutely advocate for a lot of terrible things. Let's just leave it at that. The poll was responded to by 80 people, of which half said they had been coerced.
Yes.
I'm not entirely sure what the definition of coerced means. They weren't exactly too clear on that. Could it be the trans people who were just in the room? Is that enough to coerce? Or did the trans people do something? We don't know.
Yes.
The article also included statements from 3 women who put forward the idea that trans women coerced them into sex, or tried to, or something. But one of those women was later removed from the article because it turned out that she had admitted to sexually assaulting several women herself, and then, after the BBC article was published, wrote a blog on her website calling for the murder of trans women. I shouldn't laugh, but this is so dark. Then she named some prominent trans women in that screed calling for them to be killed. Great source. Great source for this story, BBC. Well fucking done there. Some good, solid journalism right there. Yeah, so that gives you an idea of who the BBC was talking to about this stuff.
Fair and balanced.
So far, so ordinary, unfortunately, for the BBC. But what wasn't usual was the response from the trans community. Up and down the country, the community came out in force to protest and challenge the BBC in ways I haven't seen for a very long time, probably because of COVID, to be honest with you. Trans Activism UK, a group of activists who have organised several high-profile protests in London, released an open letter that gained 20,000 signatures, which called out the BBC and highlighted in incredible detail everything that was wrong with the article.
And there was a lot.
There was a lot. It was a long letter. And there were many protests held outside BBC locations in various places across the country, including London, Manchester, Bristol, Cardiff, and Brighton, as well as others. I myself went to 3 of these. I went to the one in London, Manchester, and Brighton, and talked to a whole bunch of people there and saw some really cool stuff. So here are some highlights of the speeches that were made outside BBC Manchester's base.
Now, what we are is a bunch of individuals who are sick and tired of being pressured, bullied, one of the most marginalised and victimised communities on the planet. And we thought we were making progress up to a certain point, up to maybe 6 years ago. And then suddenly this backlash. And the backlash doesn't matter if it's in people's heads, because it's always been in people's heads. People have always gone yuck and stuff about any LGBT person. But when it starts to become legitimised on the press and on the internet, and it's given credence by academics, professionals, and MPs, then there comes a point where we have to say no more. This is the line in the sand.
I just wanted to stand here in solidarity with everyone, because being a trans woman and being a trans woman of colour, when I see stuff like this, it really makes me angry, and it really makes me want to stand up, because the more visible we are, the more we are prone to this type of horrendous behaviour, and it just won't stand. And we need to remember that together, collectively, and I'm not just talking about trans people, I'm talking about trans allies as well. Like, together, we are unstoppable. And I want everyone to know that when I look out, at all of you, I see nothing but beauty. I see nothing but strength. I see nothing but courage. And that is what they are all afraid of. So they will keep pushing back, but we're going to push back even harder. So what I really want is, no matter how you want to express yourself, never apologize for it, because you are beautiful and you are valid, and you have the right to take up as much space as you want. So make sure that you express yourself however you want, whether you are a performer, whether you are a writer, whether you are a creative, or whether you just want to walk down the street and say, you know what, this is who I am, and if you don't like what I'm cooking, don't eat it.
The BBC attack was really an attack on trans women, much more than it was on trans men. And that's horrendous, and it's a thing that we consistently see. Trans men are forgotten in this debate. Yes. We are infantilized. We are told that we are brainwashed women who are self-hating and do not know who we are. We know who we are. Yes. When we talked earlier, Annie was talking earlier about how this is the recycled homophobia of the 1980s. And I would also like to say, and the 1990s, and the 2000s, and the 2010s, and everything. Because I was out, before I was out as a trans man, and that took years and so struggling, and I didn't start transitioning until I was in my mid-20s. But I was an out gay woman in a high school in the mid-noughties, and I can tell you now, I was threatened with expulsion. I was told to use different changing rooms, right? Because I was a threat to other students. I wasn't a threat to any fucking one. So that's it. It's the same rhetoric that I see now at our trans sisters. It's horrendous. I'm not going to ask anyone to chant anything. We'll just take this away. Yes, this is the truth of it. And congratulations to everyone who showed up today, and I hope this reaches more people.
And here are some chats with people I had outside the protest in Manchester and London.
My name is Pip. I go by they, them pronouns.
So why did you come to this event today?
I have a lot of close friends in my life who are trans and non-binary. I have only recently, like in the past year or so, come out as non-binary myself, because growing so much of my life, it was never an option. I never had the space or the support to explore my gender in any way, shape or form, or to know that it was anything beyond the binary. And knowing the people that I know now, and knowing so much more information thanks to social media and thanks to the trans activism online, I feel that it's my duty to come and support everyone in the trans community against systemic oppression, especially when it's national organisations like the BBC explicitly posting false information and hatred to demonise trans people.
If you had to say something to the BBC if they were here right now, what would you say to them?
I would say do research that includes trans voices. Actually listen to them and let them speak above the bigots, because this is clearly a fault in research. They are just running with whatever sensationalised information they have, like we would expect from a far-right tabloid like the Daily Mail. Fuck the Daily Mail, by the way.
If there was any trans people out there listening to you, what would you say to them?
For any trans person listening, know that you are not alone. There are people out there who are willing to support you, welcome you into your community, and just allow you to be who you want to be as an individual. You do not have to hide. There are places that will accept you.
Yeah, I'm James. I use he, him pronouns.
I'm Ollie. I'm he, him as well.
Nice to meet you, James and Ollie. So why did you come here today?
I'm trans, hello. I'm from Manchester, and been seeing a lot of stuff on Twitter and the news that's been upsetting, to say the least, I guess. Majority of it has been based around gender critical approach to trans people, LGB Alliance, and then that article in the BBC obviously didn't help. So I thought it was worth coming, showing support, solidarity, and I don't know, getting voices out there.
So as a trans person, how was it to see, like I did a haircut, about 120 people came today. How did that feel to see?
Oh, it was great. I used to go to a trans youth group in Manchester, so I know that there is a big and accepting community in Manchester. I know there was a group in Salford as well, so it's good to see sort of both sides coming together from all across Manchester and all of the different areas as well. But yeah, it was a good turnout.
You are not a trans person, is that right?
No, that's correct.
Why did you attend today?
Well, I've had a lot of trans people in my life who I care deeply about, which I think has helped me to, kind of be aware of how trans people are being demonised. Now, in a country that I thought was pretty progressive, and as a bisexual man, I feel like we've come a hell of a long way, and I feel, very happy and able to express myself. But seeing other people not being able to do that, I think if you can get out there and you can, show support and lend your voice, platform other people, if you're able to do it, you should do it. You should use your privilege to do that.
I can't give my name. It's unique and totally Googleable, but my pronouns are they, them.
Okay, uniquely Googleable it is then. So why are you here today?
I'm here because I'm pretty old in non-binary terms, and the BBC is even older than me, and I remember the kind of start of what I think of as the beginning of the current moral panic around trans issues, and I remember standing outside the BBC then in 2007 and protesting the fact that they'd given a show to Julie Bindel to talk about her views on sex change surgery, and I thought this is a ridiculous lapse, and they're still doing it, and they should know better. They should have higher standards. I know that they let people down in all kinds of directions, but I'm sorry to be back here. That's why I'm here.
We were talking earlier about your views of the BBC. How have those changed over the years?
Yeah, I suppose I grew up with the BBC in the background and the radio, and I do kind of think of them as a member of the family, and increasingly you just think of them as like your dodgy racist uncle. They keep pulling out stuff that feels like a lapse, and it does feel more personal because they have been part of my life since I've been a kid, and I massively admire a lot of work they do and a lot of interesting stuff they've done around gender. I remember things that they broadcast when I was a kid that nobody else would have, but yeah, they've just got to pick their game up. I'm really disappointed.
For people watching at home or at the bus stop or wherever they're getting this, who may doubt the effectiveness of action like this, what would you tell them based on what you've seen today?
I have no idea. I don't know who the BBC is listening to. I feel this is partly also for us to remind each other that there are a lot of us and that we've been here forever, and that there are very few people who genuinely have a problem with us, and that it's a moral panic, and I think it will pass, and that we have to hang on in there, and we have to turn out at things like this and try to move the needle. It's been very heartening to be here.
And finally, among the people who attended the protest was comedian and writer Mae Martin, famous for their Netflix show Feel Good. Here is my chat with them.
Hi, I'm Mae Martin. I use she, they pronouns.
Hey Mae, thanks for chatting. So why are you here today?
I just saw today that this is happening and thought, of course I'm going to be here. I got to be here. I'm really incensed by the recent article that the BBC put out with its inflammatory headline and its sort of uncritically platforming very transphobic views, which I think is really dangerous. And it's bad journalism, and it's not unbiased reporting. And I pay a license fee for the BBC, so it's frustrating to say the least.
So if the... Oh, there we go. If you had to say anything to the BBC, if the BBC came out here personified and started speaking to you, what would you tell them?
I would say... Well, I'm holding this sign that somebody very kindly gave me, so I would say retract the article, print an apology, and start restorative justice process, which includes platforming very informed trans voices. It's frustrating. I think they sent out the unedited version of the article to Brazil. It's just very dangerous. And I just encourage the BBC to listen to trans people.
Cool. So last thing, then I'll leave you alone. How important do you think it is for trans people to show up and protest when these things happen?
I think it's pretty crucially important to show up about things that you care about. I think protesting brings important visibility and makes a difference, but it's tough. I wish there were more allies here, more people here, but it's nice to be here and feel a sense of community anyway, in a time that there's a real palpable hostility in this country and a hysteria around trans rights. So it's nice to come and be with like-minded people.
So I went all over the place, and at each protest, over 100 people showed up. Every protest was peaceful, and depending on where it was, BBC staff, passers-by, and thousands of trans people saw what was happening. Like online, all of the pictures I put out were seen by thousands of people. Like I think one of the tweets I sent out had 250,000 impressions on Twitter or something. Like it was absurd.
That is lots.
And at the Brighton one, it was right in the middle of town, so thousands of people walked past in the hours that took place. So lots of people saw this.
Yeah.
But the article remains up. And the BBC haven't exactly put out an apology or anything. On the contrary, according to several media reports about some heated meetings between LGBT staff at the BBC and representatives from their BBC leadership, the BBC appears to be doubling down on the whole thing. And there's not been many encouraging reports from that side of things. But what to take from this? The community responded, and thousands saw it. Just because the mainstream media hasn't exactly backed down doesn't mean that we didn't have an effect. And that has to have moved the dial a little, because thousands of people will have seen this. And now, there were so many people I saw who were just waking up to oh, Jesus, this anti-trans thing's no joke. And it's yeah, this has been 5 years of this shit right now. This has been going...
Welcome to the party, pal.
It's been going on for a while. Glad you made it. And that was really good to see, because it was just well, okay. People are actually talking about this now in a big way. So whilst it wasn't necessarily reflected in the mainstream media or anything like that, I think a lot of people sort of woke up to what was happening as a result of this, as a result of trans people standing up. And the cool thing, trans people source trans people standing up.
Yes.
That's great. That's huge. And that will only encourage more people to get involved in activism in their local communities, which you should. So yes, more of this. Have you been following the BBC thing, Ashley? I mean, as a woman who sleeps with women, I'd imagine that this is something that is very close to your heart.
Yeah, quite. So, obviously, the article when it came out, it's yes, the BBC have done some pretty rubbish, dreadful reporting before. In the case, it's kind of, you accuse them of bias and they say, no, it's not, because it's not. If you accuse them of being inaccurate, then they seem to take it a little bit more seriously. But the fact is their source, one of the sources for this article, did just straight up say, yeah, I would like to fucking murder trans women, and has also done the exact things herself that she was accusing trans women of. And it's so why on earth would you choose that person unless and by you, I'm saying, the writer, rather than the BBC as an institution. Somebody is pushing an agenda, and somebody else higher up the chain, or several somebody else's, is allowing it. And that is a problem, because this is the national broadcaster, right? I used to have a cordial relationship with people at BBC Manchester. I popped in every month for three or 4 years to chat to BBC Radio Manchester about trans stuff, about T-Door, about Pride, about transitioning and, day-to-day stuff, as well as the kind of big red letter day stuff.
And if the BBC asked you now, would you do it?
It would depend, essentially. It would depend on what subject and what's the context and what are we talking about, and are you going to be putting me in a studio with somebody that wants me dead, kind of thing, So I think I would have a lot of questions for them.
I don't want to make this about whether trans people should speak to the media in general. That'll be a good episode. That'll probably be what we talk about next week.
Yeah.
I think. But I keep getting to this thing where I'm caught between two sides of things, because there's a big part of me that's no, this whole anti-trans backlash is about profiting cis people, either financially or, in the case of BBC News and The Guardian, I think, feeling very fucking smug about starting a conversation. Yes. Look, we've gone to a very interesting place. We've started a conversation about whether trans people should be allowed, blah, blah.
Yes.
God, I hate it so much. And I'm no, fuck them. They need sources for their stories. Let's not give it to them. Let's not be used by them. Let's not do it. And then the other part of me is well, how the fuck are we going to get trans people in front of people to humanize us if we don't? And I keep going back and forth. Mostly I'm fuck them, let's style them as sources, let's do a strike and just not ever talk to journalists ever again, because, and I say this as one, vultures.
Yes.
I pride myself on not being that way, which means I have definitely lost stories that would be very, very good for me. But they are profiting from hurting trans people.
Yeah.
Don't give them anything that can help them to do that. Ever.
They're profiting from pushing this narrative that trans people are dangerous, that, trans women are abusive towards women. And it's fucking stupid, because if trans women wanted to abuse other women, we wouldn't have transitioned. We'd have joined the police.
Yeah, that's a damn good point.
There's far easier ways to do it that don't involve getting bricks thrown at you by other members of society and going through HRT and lots of painful soul searching and trying to convince doctors of your validity. There's easier ways to do it, and yet for some reason...
Yeah, without wounding your employability permanently.
And yet there is still people who are stuck on that narrative that trans women are a threat. And it's like, the only thing that we're a threat to is other people's Smash Brothers scores, frankly.
Except me, as one of the many reasons why I am a minority in the minority. I'm terrible at Smash, even though I've played it for hundreds of hours and love the hell out of it. I'm very much play it on easy mode because I am weak.
I'm not very good at it, but I'm just not really into it.
Then we should play together.
That would be terrible.
Because your girlfriend strikes me as someone who is incredible at Smash.
Yes.
That beats you every time. So maybe we should play each other.
Maybe. Yeah, we could put that on Twitch, couldn't we? Anyway, so circling back around to the story.
Circling back, I think that there is definitely a thing from the anti-trans world and the world in general where trans people are inherently dangerous and coercive.
That's the narrative, isn't it?
There is this thing that went around anti-trans world for a while. Pronouns are rehypnol. If a trans person insists on pronouns, that is coercive and insidious. And our very presence is coercive and insidious, which is what makes me suspect that a lot of the fluff from this is coming from the idea that if a trans woman's just there...
That is inherently threatening.
Yeah, which... I mean, anyone who's listening who's been in a room full of trans women will know that is... I mean, the only danger you're going to be in is if you say that you don't use Mastodon, which I don't.
Actually, neither do I. But
well, we've already established that we are failures of the community because we don't understand what this stuff is. Like, a lot of trans women who are going to be listening of a certain profession are going to be like, why the fuck aren't you on Mastodon? Why are you still using Facebook? But, that's the only time you're going to be in danger, I think.
Yeah, indeed. Or if you beat somebody's high score and then they they won't offer you as many cuddles.
Yeah, but the big thing from this was the response. Like, I haven't seen anything like this. Like, I've been covering protests for a while. Like, I think the first protest I ever covered was outside the Ministry of Justice nearly 7 years ago now, when there was a trans woman that had been put in a men's prison, and about 20 trans people showed up outside the Ministry of Justice. And this was a national story that just went on for about a month. And that got 20 people at its height. This stuff, 100 each in the 3 I went to, and a good number at the other ones in Bristol and Cardiff as well. Like this.
Yeah.
And there was another one in Stoke-on-Trent, which I didn't get to go to that I really wanted to. Like, there was a massive response. And not only that, there was an event outside the BBC for TDOR this year, which I didn't go to because I was sick.
Yes.
Where like over 100 people showed up to do the TDOR thing outside the BBC in the centre of London. Like, this was a huge thing. Like, I think this is the start of a more organised response because hundreds of people showed up. They talked to each other. They exchanged details.
Yeah.
A lot of people were looking to what the trans to find out where all these things are. So we wrote stuff and put it out there, and that got a few more people there than maybe would have. And loads of people were doing the same thing. Like, loads of people really moved on this, and it was sort of the start of a framework of activists all over the place acting up, and that was really cool.
Yeah,
and I think we're going to see a lot more of that. So exciting times in a way. This really lit a fire under people.
It did.
I'm not going to say the BBC does a favour because they fucking didn't. This
no, they did
article
not.
is
no, they
evil
didn't.
and absurd, but the response from it was great, and more of that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the unfortunate thing, really, because not everybody's going to be capable of turning up to a protest and doing direct action of various types. Anybody that is able to, that's got the time, the inclination, the spoons, etc. If that keeps building and it keeps sort of going out there, getting the word out, being organised, that can only be a good thing, because then when it's not the BBC, it's The Guardian or it's the government, and all of these places are doing things which are harmful to the trans community, and that needs to be highlighted. Basically, too long didn't read. The article was dreadful, but the response to it has given me a certain measure of hope, shall we say.
Yeah, we will up with this. We will not take lying down.
Yes.
That was a combination of different things, but I think people know what I mean.
Yes, absolutely. And, nor should we. Don't have to sit here and just let them abuse us forever, because gotta fight back. Gotta fight for truth, justice, freedom, reasonably priced love, and a hard-boiled egg.
Damn right. But yeah, that's the news. Shall
That
we
is
move
the
on to the
news.
meat of this episode?
Ah, yes, the meatiest meat.
Yeah, this is pretty meaty because this is the 69th episode of this podcast.
Nice.
And as such, we've decided to just sniff a bunch of poppers, buy some wobbly things from certain websites, hit some dating apps, and go off to seek some strange and just go to town on some people. And we have recorded the whole thing for you to enjoy right here, right now.
Woo!
None of that is true. We haven't done that because we don't want to get banned from Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But what we are actually doing is based around the idea that Ashley knows things about certain less than mainstream sexy things known as kink, and I do not, because my sexuality, at its most extreme, is 2 naked guys in a bedroom.
Yeah, only 2.
So Sorry?
Only 2. Carry on.
Yeah, see, that's the thing here. I am what is classically known as vanilla, to the point where I did a quiz on the website FetLife, which is a fetish social media dating thing. I don't even understand it. I was on it for 20 minutes,
Yeah.
and there was a reason I'll get to later as to what was only 20 minutes.
Yes.
I did the quiz on there, and my kink score was less than 1%. Which apparently is almost impossible.
That's impressive in a way.
Apparently, my sexuality is 1% brat, and I don't entirely understand what that means.
Okay.
But maybe you can explain it to me later, Ashley.
Yeah, it's fine.
So, this episode is basically me asking Ashley a bunch of really, really bad questions about what the hell kink is.
Yes.
And Ashley, I'm sorry in advance.
Yes. Well, we'll see. We'll see how it works, and then I'll decide if I accept that in advance apology or not.
So, Ashley, what is kink?
Okay, so kink is an umbrella term. God, there are so many umbrella terms in the queer community, aren't there? And it's essentially, I think I've seen it defined in several different ways, but I think the one that's kind of fits the best, as it were, is that it's sexual/relationship practices which are not considered to be mainstream. And that covers a lot of ground, and that's the idea. As a term, you want something useful, a shorthand that could cover any one of a number of things. But it's probably worth pointing out that it's not, a relationship that, I made a joke about, only 2 guys. A relationship involving more than 2 people is not inherently kinky. It might have some of that element in the same way that any other relationship might. But the fact is, polyamorous, polysexual relationship is not inherently kinky, and it's, I think it's more commonly about emotions and, love and respect, and really that's what all relationships should be about. And before we say anything else, I would say that all the stuff that some kinky people, kinksters, as is a term I've seen, talk about and get up to, it's all based on the concept of being safe, sane, and consensual. Consent is such a big thing, and communication and, looking after each other, depending, if you've adopted a particular role within a scenario or relationship, then that, that's not to be taken to its extremes. You have to kind of communicate with each other and respect one another and respect one another's boundaries. So yes, that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but basically it's an umbrella term that covers a lot of ground for anything that's non-standard, shall we say.
I have experience in this.
Yes? You're familiar with the non-standard, are you?
Yes, because I accidentally went to an orgy once.
So I've done that, surprisingly, but you first, go on.
Well, this was about 6-7 years ago. I was having a bit of a rough time. I'd only been out for a couple of years and things were a bit rough, and my friend was like, look, do you want to go to a thing? I'm going to a thing. We can get you, a ticket that is lower priced and stuff. And, it's basically kind of like Glastonbury in a nice mansion. And I was like, I went to Glastonbury a few years ago. It was one of the best times of my life. I fucking loved it. I got to see the bootleg Beatles, which was great. And I had a great time. So yeah, I'd love to go to Glastonbury in a mansion. Yeah. I got there and was handed a 28-page booklet on consent and was like, this is strange. But consent is a good thing.
Yes.
I learned some things. And I was there for a full 24 hours before I realised what it was, because, that night, I went to hang out in the hot tub. I should have seen the signs. And then, went to bed, woke up in the middle of the night, and some people were just fucking in the yurt I was staying in. And they were fucking right next to the door. And I definitely needed to pee. So I lied there under the covers for an hour, trying to will the urine away out of my bladder somehow, whilst listening to these 2 people have sex. And for what it's worth, they were both pros. They were very good because they went this just one time for an hour.
Yeah.
They were at it for an hour. which, considering the yurt we were in, not the easiest thing to do. Or maybe the yurt being a little bit uncomfortable and cold actually helped. I don't know.
It is a good way to warm up, getting sexy. So...
Yeah, but like the average time, because I looked this up afterwards because I was just like, this can't be right. I looked it up and it was like the average like sex time is like 15 minutes. 15 to 30 minutes. They went for an hour. Like, these people were very good at what they do. But it made it very awkward for me to, go to the toilet. But then I thought, hang on, they're the people who are inconsiderately fucking next to the door. If somebody walks past them, that's on them.
I mean, yeah. That's...
So I got up and I went to the loo, and on the way out, the guy who was on top was just like, morning. I was like, this is fine. This isn't normal.
This is fine.
But yeah, the next day, did like a couple of workshops and stuff that were all about consent and stuff again. And I was like, okay. And then that night saw a bunch of people like dressed in leather and like whipping each other and stuff. And just like, oh, okay. My friend may not have been entirely forthright as to what this is, although to be honest, it's kind of on me because the signs were there.
You could have asked, I suppose, but saying, "Oh, do you want to come to a thing?" Like, I think if I was inviting somebody along to an orgy, I would make it fairly explicit that was what it was. So...
Well, to call it an orgy is probably a disservice to the whole thing because there was most of the time people weren't fucking, but there was group sex happening very, very near me.
Yes,
there were doors and walls in the way. But that was very much a thing, and I saw some stuff. So I retreated to the kitchen.
Yes.
And I made tea for people whilst they were on breaks.
Yeah.
It was a nice night. Yeah. So how did you accidentally end up at an orgy, Ashley? Because it's alarming that we both have an I accidentally went to an orgy story. That is not. Yeah. That isn't a story most people have. So how is it that we both have that story?
I'd been for a night out, and so there was I was with a friend of mine who sadly is no longer a friend of mine because she's been drinking the turf Kool-Aid. But she invited me along to this. Hey, come back with me and my girlfriend. And so we went. I seem to recall it was quite a long drive. It was out into the sticks, out of Manchester city centre to somewhere. It wasn't in Stalybridge. It was somewhere like that, where it's like a fairly small town with a railway station, and it's all like, grey stone walls and hills and stuff. And, it's got a nice view wherever you are. So we're in this house, and then so we all got back, and, spliffs were lit, drinks were poured, and then everyone started taking their clothes off. But because I was in, casually dressed and engaged in conversation with the person next to me, and then I turned my head round to look at what the rest of the room was getting up to, and they're all just fucking just getting on with some sex, like right there, and everybody's involved. And I was like, oh gosh, I have misread this situation entirely.
I just got an image of you there just being stunned, just like, oh, okay.
And that was exactly the image. Oh, and suddenly everything sort of dawned on me. And the person that I'd been talking to was obviously thinking that, Ashley seems very nice, but I'll get her clothes off soon, kind of thing. And I was like, oh gosh, this is not what I was expecting. And so it's worth pointing out.
Did you partake?
I actually didn't, because at the time I was a few years out, 3 or 4 years out, maybe something like that, possibly pre-HRT, but also basically at the time I self-described as asexual because I was having difficulty sort of forming connections with people, and I wasn't interested in sex. There was a trauma element as well as to why I wasn't interested in sex at that time, which is not really something I've discussed on the podcast and probably won't. So there's a whole thing, and all of a sudden there's a load of naked people there. I kind of was like, oh God, actually I need to get out of this room for a bit. So I did what you did, in fact, and went to the kitchen and just started making cups of tea. So
this is why we get on so well.
I know. And then so
we are very different in a lot of ways, but fundamentally, yeah. When push comes to shove, we retreat to the kitchen.
Make the tea. Yeah, exactly. And so every so often someone would come in and sort of check on me. It's like, yes, you all right? Oh, no, I'm fine. Everything's okay. But then there was one point a little bit later on when the sun was starting to come up, actually, where sort of everybody around me is naked and I'm just sat there, in front of the sofa, fully clothed still, with a cup of tea, going, well, isn't this nice? It's just so, yeah. And it just happened completely by accident. But so
just loving that image of you just sat there fully clothed, just like, well, everyone's fucking just there, like, this is nice, good tea.
Oh,
this Earl Grey.
I think I was aware of the irony in the situation by that point. But yeah, it was nice. And in fairness, they were all fairly nice people at the time. Obviously,
that's the thing. They were all really nice at the one I went to. There were some people who, I think I was the only trans person there, I think. I might not have been, but I'm pretty sure I was. So it was a bit othering. They were just a bit like one person who I could swear I'd never seen before in my life came up to me and said, "I'm sorry, I misgendered you earlier." And I was like, "Oh, that's fine. I don't even remember who you are, or when, or have I even seen you before? Was I there?" But I just did the thing where I tried to make it, as smooth as humanly possible to get out of the awkward conversation. And we're just like, "I feel so ashamed." And I was like, "I mean, don't, because I don't even know who you are."
So it's probably worth pointing out that many, many years ago, when I was at uni in Preston, there was there was two gay bars. And so there's one that was just like a gay pub, and then there was like a nightclub down the way. And once a month, this nightclub's upstairs bit would host a fetish night. And basically, at least partly as an excuse to go out wearing a dress, me and my friends would go along to this. And so that was where I first heard, various people who've filled in my music collection ever since. So, Covenant, who I've subsequently supported in one of the bands I was in, which was really weird. Discovered Ladytron and B-Born Beton to certain elements of Nine Inch Nails and Sisters of Mercy and various gothy things, essentially. It was where I kind of discovered it because I hadn't really heard that music in the rock clubs I'd grown up with.
Fetish clubs seem to do really like industrial.
Yes, they do. And it's kind of part of the aesthetic of industrial, in a sense, which is a whole episode in itself, I think, but probably not of this podcast. But obviously in this...
So when you say fetish club, because I'm not entirely sure about what this world is, are we talking about people who gather because they enjoy a thing that is not typically sexual, like feet or leather?
So, I mean, I'm sure there were some people there who enjoy feet, but so what a fetish club will tend to consist of is it's a club, it's a room, perhaps. Now, a lot of places that do a fetish night will have a couple of different rooms, and maybe there's different music in each of them, but they'll be like a playroom, as it were. So that's got stuff in it that or that one could be tied to, or
they had those at my thing. They look like the cross things that people will be flayed on in Game of Thrones.
I see.
And I was like, okay, that I've seen those TV shows. They don't look like fun, but apparently they're very fun. Apparently they're so fun they make people come.
Again, it depends what you're into. You don't have to like it, but yes. So those various bits of paraphernalia, shall we say, that were in...
Like whips?
Yes, that you could borrow, but a lot of people brought their own, as you might imagine.
That's just hygiene.
Exactly. Particularly in this day and age. And there's obviously a couple of different types of striking object, and some of them will actually legit hurt if someone, really puts... It's all in the wrist, basically. And some of them will just... kind of make more of a noise, really, and you still feel the strike, the impact. It tends to be referred to as impact play when basically...
Yeah, see, this is where where some people like myself could be very confused about the whole thing, because being hit by things hurts.
Yes.
And being hurt isn't pleasurable to me.
Indeed. But
what do people get out of it when they are enjoying sexy being hurt?
Well, so I think essentially when you are in that position, it's not intended to actually hurt in a genuine leaving you with injuries kind of way. It's not intended to actually really, really hurt and draw blood and whatever. You maybe get a moment kind of thing, and and essentially it's about stimulation, and that can be any one of a number of things, be that like impact play, or very light touching, or being fondled in various different places at once, blah blah blah. And it's about being stimulated in at the base level. Now, what some people will find is that the line between pain and pleasure can be quite blurry at times, and particularly if you're using paraphernalia which is specifically designed for the purpose, in that it's designed to, hurt a bit but not massively, and it just kind of adds to this stimulation kind of thing. But it's probably worth pointing out that there's, of course, a power dynamic at play, in that somebody who is submitting to this is usually referred to as a submissive, sub, whatever, and the person who is seemingly has control of the situation, although really they kind of don't, is the dominant partner, and usually they're the one with the whip hand, shall we say.
Ah, so they get off on giving orders, and the subs get off on being like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, yes, person who's not either of those things.
Precisely, yeah. And some people enjoy both of those things, which is, that's where the term switch comes in. And
so they're versatile. They can
yes,
they can give and receive.
Exactly. And no, I'm not going to say that. But the thing is, so somebody who is a submissive and they're perhaps in a situation which would otherwise be quite threatening, they're perhaps restrained or blindfolded or both or whatever, that person has to consent to that explicitly and ideally enthusiastically. So basically, have you heard of a safe word?
Oh yeah,
yeah. So
I'm alive. I've heard of a safe word.
You know what that is, and so
usually it's a joke in a sitcom.
Yeah, exactly.
Is when I've seen it.
Yeah. Well, so the problem is when you're dating somebody who's a programmer like I am, then your safe word has to contain a mixture of capital letters and lowercase letters and a number and at least one special character as well. So it can be quite difficult to remember.
I would have thought it would be something like halt and catch fire. I thought that would be a pretty good safe word. In fact, like that there was a show called that, and apparently that's like a fictional computer command for, everything's gone a bit weird. Stop.
I see. Okay.
So if people are out there looking for a new safe word or a safe phrase, halt and catch fire, I think that's fucking rad.
It's a pretty good one. Yeah. I mean, I think you want something that doesn't sound like a noise that you might make. Right, so like...
What, are people likely to be like, halt and catch fire? Ah!
Well, quite. They're probably not. Although I did hear a story of when I was at uni, I did hear a story about a guy who every time he ejaculated, he would say, bestow. To the extent that his girlfriend dumped him.
That just implies that he's coming gravy. Which is that is not healthy.
That's not what should be happening. Yeah.
If you are orgasming and spurting out of your bits gravy, that means you've had too much gravy, I assume, or your organs have now become gravy creators, which is psychologically troubling to me.
I think some people just like to just for some reason. Certain phrases have a particular connection. Christ knows how someone can develop a connection to fucking gravy, but there you go.
So, when it comes to kink, like, what are the most popular genres of kink? Because I asked this because I went on FetLife for 20 minutes once. Because a friend of mine was like, you're a bit disillusioned with dating apps. Why don't you try FetLife? Because on there, you being trans is going to be the most boring thing in the world. And I was like, there's good logic in that. I'll go on FetLife and see if I can get a date. Within 20 minutes, somebody was in my messages just going like, do you want to do some medical role play? I was like, what? And they were like, well, do you want to basically we like the gloves and the medical thing. And I was like, I'm trans. Medical stuff is the least sexy thing I can imagine.
Yes. So
that is just not for me.
I know quite a few trans women who feel the same way.
Yeah, so I was like, well, that's my time on FetLife.
Swing and a miss.
So I know that there's leather people who really get off on the concept of leather. Like, they really get off on it. And then there's like the people who like the whipping. I guess they're the BDSM types.
Yes. Yeah.
Bondage, domination, sadomasochism. Is that what it means?
I think yes.
But yeah, you've got that. And then you've got like the role-playing people. Like the medical person I met.
Yes.
Like, what are the main genres?
Well, I mean, there's loads of them. Like, if it exists, there's a kink of it. It's like Rule 34, but not online. And so even in high street sex shops like Ann Summers, there's like, beginner bondage BDSM sets, and they will usually have fluffy handcuffs, a blindfold, maybe a spanking paddle.
Yeah, those are like on the cheeky end.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, let's be a bit cheeky.
A little bit cheeky, which basically I don't think it would be sold in the mainstream sex shop if they didn't sell, kind of thing. So I think there's kind of light bondage elements that lots of people do, really. And so I mean, okay, so imagine you have a sexual partner who you are excited, and you are wearing a blindfold, so you can't see what's coming, as it were. And in the same way that kind of having sex with the lights off, if it's dark and you can't quite see what's coming, that can be quite stimulating in itself. The anticipation is heightened. You kind of feel more of a, and then you feel their hopefully nice and warm hands touching you in various places be they specifically explicit places or just elsewhere, and it kind of builds you up. So you can kind of see where that comes from immediately. And so I would say a blindfold is possibly, the blindfold is the gateway drug, because through that you start learning about anticipation and consent and kind of communicating with each other. And I think restraints and blindfolds are quite common, and I think, in a sense, that's certainly where I started when, at that aforementioned fetish club. That was kind of one of the first things I chose to experience. And indeed, the anticipation, the kind of stimulation of it, and I get people who are very into leather because they like the way it feels on their skin, they like the way it kind of moves with them. Same goes for PVC or latex or whatever your particular thing is, because people are into those things as well. Some people, their fetish, such as it is to lots and lots of frills, lots of...
Frills?
Yeah, really frilly...
Like peplums.
Sorry?
Like peplums.
What's that?
There's a thing that was big for a while ago, like on dresses, where it's like a little flappy thing around the waist.
Oh, I see. No, I mean like petticoats, where it's got lots of ruffles on it and is, extremely overtly femme sort of thing.
Oh.
There's a really...
See, they just look terribly uncomfortable to me.
Again, it depends on the context, doesn't it? Context is everything, not just in journalism. That's true for quite a lot of other things, including kink, really. I suppose a relatively common icon of certain types of fetishism is, the maid's dress. And I blame anime for this, really, and the whole... Thanks, Japan.
Well, yeah, you see, this is the interesting thing, right? Because this is what I do know about fetishes, or paraphilias, to give it a really cold clinical name.
Well, it's not necessarily the same thing, but carry on.
Fair enough. It's like, at some point, these certain tastes develop earlier in life. So, for example, in World War II, young people would go down during the air raids, they would go down to the shelter and they would wear a gas mask. And then 10, 20 years later, a whole bunch of adults were walking around with a gas mask fetish. That was a big thing, and that's a big thing amongst people who were alive during World War II.
Yeah.
Cut to the 90s, gunging people on kids' TV is a huge thing. And I only found this out recently at your house, talking to some of your guests at a party that we both went to at your place. 20 years later, there are people walking around with a fetish for being gunged. They call it splodging. And I find that fascinating. So, fetishes can be defined by what a generation is exposed to in their younger years, which is astonishing to me.
Yeah, and so just to clarify, splodging was a new one for me as well. That was quite a party we had, wasn't it?
I learned so much.
Indeed.
In fact, the party may be what inspired me to put this idea for a meet in the suggestion box.
In fairness, this is episode 69. We have to talk about sex, otherwise what's the fucking point?
Exactly.
And just to clarify for you listeners, this was a Halloween party. There was no kinky orginess involved.
Well, there might have been, but I didn't see any.
Yeah. It was after you'd gone to bed. Well, interestingly, so there's the whole nature versus nurture debate, as there always is. Is it related to something that we do that comes along in childhood, or is it related to stuff that happens before you're born? And there's, perhaps points on both sides. As you say, there's definitely, or rather there were, 20 years after the war, there were a lot of people with a gas mask fetish. There's no getting away from that.
Yeah, so that basically forms one of my main arguments against the idea of autogynephilia, which is a nonsense thing invented by a bastard to try and make trans identities inherently sexual. The idea that trans people get off on imagining that they have a vagina or something.
Yeah.
If fetishes are generational, how come trans people have been a thing forever? Where the fuck did they get that from?
Well, quite. And that's why Whispers is an idiot and autogynephilia is bullshit.
Yeah. It doesn't really make any sense.
No, it doesn't. And it never did, even just on its own merit.
But splodging, to me, makes total sense. Even though I don't think I could count myself as a member of the splodging community, I can definitely understand where that came from based on just... I don't think a lot of younger listeners will not understand how much gunging there was on kids' TV in the 90s. Like, that, it was... Every other show had that. It's some kind of aspect of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, had Live and Kicking, Chuckle Brothers...
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and...
Funhouse. Funhouse was probably invented...
Sharp.
Yeah, Pat Sharp is probably responsible for a whole community of fetish people that he must be aware of. He must be aware of it. It's like how, people put down, the people who are sexually into the furry thing. Not all furries are into the sexy side of it, but there is a sexy side that exists. Disney. The rise of Disney.
They must know.
Clearly, there's a thing in this.
Maybe that was their plan all along. I think, so the thing that kind of, I don't find the splodging thing sexy, personally, and it's simply on a practical level, which is the whole gunging thing. They'd sit them on a special chair or in a tank or something, and then they'd get covered in this green stuff, gunge stuff. And if you did that in a sexual context, think of the fucking cleanup. You'd need to put rubber sheets down and, clear it all up after. It just sounds like a right load of faff, really.
I think cleanliness is probably a part of my sexuality, in that I'd like that my partner and myself to have had a shower within a day.
Yes, before
fucking.
Yeah.
Maybe 12 hours before fucking.
That's fair.
Like maybe not immediately before, because, sometimes, the natural aroma and pheromones of a person are quite nice. But, at some point recently.
Yes.
I'd like to, and I would like to remain remotely clean.
Yeah, absolutely. And, depending on how energetic you get, it's definitely a good idea to have a shower afterwards.
We need to start wrapping this up, because we could probably talk about this for another 4 hours.
Yes, we
because
could,
I find it
but we
endlessly
shouldn't.
fascinating. But basically, kink is a thing.
Yes. And
Don't be weird about it. It doesn't matter if you're not into it, but also it's something that seemingly makes people so happy it makes them come. And that's lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're into something and you find somebody else who's into something, just try it. Be gentle. Start small. Work your way up, and
get permission. Jesus,
consent.
Don't just show up with carrier bags full of equipment and be like, "This is our evening tonight."
Yes.
Call ahead.
Consent. Everything safe, sane, and consensual. Some people might have fetishes for something which is actually quite dangerous, and
I can see the medical thing going a bit wrong.
For sure, yeah. And so many trans women I know are just very much not into the medical thing. But again, think about it. There's the whole kind of nurse/doctor, patient, or whatever. And it's about the power dynamic, isn't it? And it's about saying, oh, yes, mistress/master/mixter,
I think that is a sign of tremendous privilege. If you have been able to cultivate a medical fetish,
yeah,
I think that is a very privileged position to be in, because even before I came out going to the doctors, it was just usually a 60-year-old man.
Yeah.
It's just,
it's not sexy
at me. My experiences of the medical world were not sexy, but maybe other people's world. I could see it, you're sort of being looked at and looked after by someone who's quite attractive to you.
Yeah, I guess it depends how hot the doctor is. Anyway, so to wrap this up, as somebody that enjoys that sort of thing myself, I would say if there's something that you want to explore, I think finding a community of people that will help you do that can be so valuable, because it can be very fulfilling. It can be it can be a lot of things, but it can certainly be fulfilling. It can be very relaxing, and it can be very loving.
Fun.
And in fact, it should be very loving. And yes, absolutely fun, because what's the point otherwise?
And if you're not into that kind of stuff, join me in the kitchen. We'll make tea.
Yeah, and that's fine too. And no one's...
And also, if you happen to be at a thing, don't fuck near the door.
Yeah, people need to get out.
Because it was awkward and weird, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Just fuck away from the door so people can leave without it being awkward.
And on that bombshell, I think it's time to wrap this up. If you have any questions about kink, then
don't ask me.
Tweet us, I guess. Yeah.
No, don't tweet us. Jesus, don't tweet anybody else. Tweet people who have got over 18 and are clearly into it.
That's true.
I don't think I want to open the emails one day and find lots of questions about how to use a leather spike thing or something.
I'm not sure that's a thing that is. Okay, anyway, let's just wrap this up. So, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in on this episode 69,
where we got sexy and a bit dark, and then sexy again.
Absolutely. And thanks for listening. Thanks for supporting us on the Patreon if you do that, and if you don't, that's fine too.
Yeah, you should follow us on all the things. So you should follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/whatthetrans, twitter.com/whatthetrans. We got a website.
We do.
Where I write things sometimes, whatthetrans.com. Check that out. I'm working on a thing about why the UK government are actual fascists.
Yeah.
That's not going to get me in trouble at all.
Not too much research involved in that one.
Yeah, and Patreon. We got a Patreon, patreon.com/whatthetrans. We use that money so I can get coaches to things like I spent all this month doing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you help us keep the lights on, pay for our hosting costs, and we will occasionally do Patreon episodes, which, although they're not Patreon exclusives, because we don't like to do exclusives, you do get them before everybody else does. And we've got another couple more of those coming down the pipeline, including one about one of my very favourite things.
Let's leave people in suspense.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, that's us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This episode of What the Trans was produced by Michelle Snow and Ashley Talbot, which is me.
and this podcast was edited by Ben Swithin, who you can follow at Ben Swithin on Twitter.
We would like to give special thanks to our Patreon producers, who are Claire Renshaw,
Ontologically Unjust,
Floopeth and Dragon Biscuits,
Moira,
Sophie Bradshaw,
Charlotte Emily Scarden,
Stevie Lang,
Stella,
Michaela Irish,
Cindergosa,
Rebecca Prentice,
Graham Mulholland,
Crazy Richard,
Dan Oblivion,
Georgina Young,
Ty Griffiths,
Florence Stanley,
Riley,
Helen
Mallory Moore,
Chrissy Jarvis,
A Hitchhiking Velociraptor,
Nick Ross,
Alex Chalkley,
Sim,
Melody Nix,
Fiona Punchard,
John,
Lynn Mackay,
Nick Duffy,
CB Bailey,
Gordon Cameron,
Peter Kimball,
Rachel T.S.,
Wen Riverup,
Vic Parsons,
Tila Wild,
Atom James,
Vanessa Billington,
Rowan Littlejohns,
Desiree Markland,
Patreon user,
Derek Victor,
Emma Doyle,
Owen Willis,
Catherine,
Mina,
Elliot McVeigh,
Cassius Adair,
Tuck,
Melissa Brooks,
Ian Cumber,
Maddie Bell,
Karakan12,
April Heller,
Sophie Lewis,
Alexandra Lilly,
Claire Scott,
Ariadne Pena,
Lauren O'Niles,
Mara Reynolds,
Bernard's Pink Jelly Bean,
Lenos.
and Chris Hobley. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.
Thank you.